President, thank you for your leadership. Pat Gelsinger, is the CEO of Intel, and I think if there has been one relentless, persistent, dissatisfied advocate for this legislation, it was Pat. And also to recognize Intel as a beacon of excellence and innovation. Thank you so much. So again, it was just a tremendous privilege to tour this facility and meet the brilliant individuals pioneer the future of semiconductors, microbiology, and so much more. These researchers embody California's entrepreneurial spirit and technological prowess, helping America deliver the world's biggest breakthroughs. With the American Competes Act, the House voted to create jobs, expand research capacity, and turbocharge innovation, increasing funds for the Department of Education facilities like the Advanced Light Source, Dr. Kevin, and more than half of doubling funds for NSF programs to accelerate, National Science Foundation funds to accelerate solution-focused research. Competes, let me just talk to you about a little bit about it, because Competes will power the success of our workers as well as our businesses, helping us compete globally, helping us do that, build more products here at home at lower cost. This is a piece of legislation that will enable our president, our government, whatever it is, but at this time, our president, to declare us independent, self-sufficient in terms of how we address the factors of production needed for us to prevail. Appropriating $52 billion to ensure that America leads the way on semiconductor fabrication, building on the ALS's research to prevent costly chip shortages. Pat. Mr. Chips. And then it authorizes $45 billion to fix our broken supply chains by strengthening American manufacturing and boosting production across key industries from health and agriculture to energy and IT. These investments will create good-paying union jobs and transport our nation into the future, supercharging our success at home and the ability to win on the world stage. To thank you all for showing our nation the importance of investing in research, because we can make the argument for more funding when we show the success of what has been done. Previous Competes bills were driven by ideas born in the Bay Area, and that ingenuity continues to drive us today. We started in the Bay Area, now we go 2006, 2005, 2006, and traveled the country. They said, why don't you start in MIT? I said, because we started in the Bay Area, where it all began. And we actually, part of that work was to produce ARPA-E. That legislation sprang from that. And now we go beyond. As we negotiate, what's happening is one bill passed the Senate, one bill passed the House. We have some differences, not irreconcilable, but nonetheless worthy of discussion. And then that will go to what we call reconciliation, and then on to the president to be signed into the law, ensuring that projects like the ALS can do more than keep pace. We need you to continue, as you have, leading the technologies of the future. And it's a pretty exciting thing. I just want to tell you a couple more things about it, because when it comes to young people, and that's what we talked about earlier, the future, we're investing in our future. The young, bright minds here remind us winning the future means supporting our students. The Competes Act will strengthen and diversify our nation's talent pool by funding greater access to STEM education in K-12 public schools. We've been advocating that for a long time. Breaking down barriers to STEM jobs faced by women and people of color, and providing new resources from research funding to high school apprenticeships. By supporting the next generation, America will enhance our technological and economic dominance for decades to come. Again, thank you here, all of you, for showing the nation the importance of investing in research. Previous competes bills, again, were driven by the Bay Area. As we negotiate, we will do so with the idea of that, science, 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 and science, that it's absolutely essential that we do so. So now it is my privilege to yield to a vital partner in all of this, a fighter for everything in her magnificent district, which takes great pride. She has been here before. Some of you have met her before. It is not the first visit for many of us, but I haven't been here in a while. Barbara's a regular. It's a privilege to yield to Barbara Lee. You may not know this about Barbara Lee, but let me tell you this. She is so important. Of course, her district comes first. She's always bragging about it and the rest. Our district's a butt on the Bay Bridge. That's what we're about. We have our competition as to our progressive nature of our districts. But you don't know this about her. She is the very important chairman of the Appropriations Committee that funds State Department, foreign ops, everything to do with foreign policy. So we were just in Israel, we were in Munich for the security conference, and we were in the UK to discuss what's happening in Ukraine, and she was the most sought after person on our delegation. She's got the purse strings for whether it's loan guarantees for Ukraine, whether it's humanitarian assistance, whether so many things that deal with our national security. It's my honor to present to you. You don't need an introduction to her, but I will present to you Madam Chair Barbara Lee.
Well, good morning. It's good to be home. And look at the sunshine, Madam Speaker. I'm just delighted to be with you this morning. And first, let me just thank Madam Speaker for that very gracious and humbling introduction. But I just have to say to Madam Speaker and to you that being with Madam Speaker, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, in a congressional delegation abroad, and I've been with her several times, but I can tell you that not only is she leading our domestic agenda for the people here in our own country, but she's a global leader. And the stories and the leadership that Speaker Pelosi presents on the global stage, we have to really acknowledge that. She's a truly national and international treasure, and being with her, it's just, it's inspirational. It's inspirational, Madam Speaker, so thank you very much. Yeah, and to Congresswoman Doris Matsui, it's really good to be with you once again, my Berkeley sister, and also to the team here at the lab. And thank you all again for welcoming all of us here once again. And we're here, as Speaker Pelosi said, to highlight the America Competes Act. And this landmark legislation, and it was bipartisan, will fix our supply chains, increase domestic manufacturing, and strengthen our global competitiveness in the science and tech sectors. Here at the lab, I feel that our planet is secure because of what you are doing here. And I know this bill, when it becomes law, is just going to really move us forward in the direction that the lab has been moving forward for so many years. The work being done here at the Berkeley Lab is really a great example of federal investment in scientific innovation. For nearly a century, Berkeley Lab has maintained its status as a major international center for research with the mission of solving the most pressing scientific problems facing humanity. The lab remains a national leader in developing the scientists and researchers of the next generation, and it's really with great pride that the Berkeley Lab is located, of course, in my congressional district, the 13th Congressional District. The Competes Act makes critical investments in our technological leadership, and as we've seen with COVID, with the pandemic, it's laid some really bare and deep weaknesses in a supply chain that is increasingly reliant on foreign manufacturing. The Compete Act, it invests in semiconductor fabrication, supply chain improvements, strengthening our domestic manufacturing, building more critical components right here in the United States, which we know will positively impact our local economies. And finally, this bill invests in increasing the diversity, which Madam Speaker mentioned, of our scientists, researchers, and technologists who drive the innovation economy. It includes provisions that support increasing diverse participation in STEM from pre-K to higher education, and conducting research to study the barriers of entry for people of color in the field. Michael and all of you here at the lab, you know how diligent we've been for the last at least 50 years in terms of addressing racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we've made a lot of progress here at the lab, but we have a long way to go. And I think now this is going to really help us move forward in a very positive and aggressive direction. And I think, though, the Berkeley Lab, because of our partnership and because of your commitment to equity, I think that really we're far ahead of what these barriers are and knowing what they are. You will have quite a bit of input into the law as we move forward. And so thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for inviting us here. And I just have to say how happy I am, and it's with great pride that Madam Speaker and Congresswoman Doris Matsui are here in my district. Thank you again, Madam Speaker. And now I'd like to introduce a phenomenal woman, someone who's a postdoctoral fellow in the Joint Genome Institute, Department of Energy, Dr. Janelle Basso. Janelle, come forward.
Thank you, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, for your kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be here to speak with you today. My scientific vision is to conduct and communicate science while engaging with students of diverse backgrounds and perspectives. As a postdoctoral fellow at the DOE Joint Genome Institute, where my research focuses on plant microbe interactions, there is an incredible dedication to team science and research, along with outreach and engagement. Berkeley Lab has provided the unique opportunity to pursue my interests as a scientist while using my experiences to serve as a mentor, leveraging funding, obtain visibility, and develop current and future collaborations. Therefore, it is truly encouraging to see that the America Competes Act aims to support more early career scientists who can conduct research at the institutions of their choice. These are life-changing investments that will support the further development and implementation of solutions that can alter the trajectory of the world. In addition, the bill accelerates efforts to increase diversity and inclusion in STEM, thus raising awareness within federal science agencies and higher education institutions about barriers faced by historically marginalized groups. I am hopeful that these efforts will allow us to identify and implement best practices and magnify the number of individuals who seek STEM careers and research in their future. I take pleasure in seeing some of that work currently implemented here at Berkeley Lab through the K-12 program, which I have actively taken part in, which fosters the development and future researchers like Alejandro, Michelle, and Tristan.
All right.
They are all exemplary examples of the future generations of scientists at DOE National Labs. Thank you for your commitment and dedication towards positively sculpting the world through scientific discovery, contributing to a more inclusive scientific community, and making the research vision of many a reality. And of course, thank you for your attention, and I would now like to transition to our next speaker, the Honorable Doris Matsui, for the 6th Congressional District of California. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be back to my alma mater, Berkeley. And I wore my blue. I'm here, the speaker wore the blue too, but she's always appropriate. We know that. But, you know, there's never any choice between red and blue. You know, it's always the blue. But I want to thank you, Dr. Basso, very much for what you're doing and the future that you really exemplify. It's really a pleasure to be back here. I've been back here probably a couple times, but not recently, at the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And as a Berkeley grad, I got my education here. I'm class of '66. That was a wonderful decade, you might say, right? So it really energized me in a spirit of understanding that it takes a lot of people and people working together, and that's what Berkeley did and taught. So I just am really happy to be here. It's the power of this institution in our national life is really incredible. I want to thank Speaker Pelosi. We can't thank her enough for everything that she does every day, but I don't know of a woman with more energy than Nancy Pelosi. And she knows everything. Believe me, she knows everything. And so, and we could depend on her too. She has all our backs, which we all appreciate, Nancy. So thank you so much. And my good friend here, Barbara Lee. Honestly, Barbara is really a driver, not only domestically, not only here in Berkeley, in California, across the nation, but around the world. You know, you are really the person who drives in us the fairness, the responsibility for justice, and we love you, Barbara. Thank you so much. So I just want to say thank you very much, all of you here, because you do exemplify what's great in California and the rest of the nation too, as we strive for the future. And I can't think of a better place to talk about the Competes Act here, because everything starts in California, right? You think about it, right? As my good friend Anna Eshu says, remember the silicone? That's where it all came from, right? In Northern California. But let me tell you, as a lead House Democrat on two important provisions, I know what a powerful tool that this Competes bill will be for supporting U.S. leadership in science, especially in the semiconductor and communications technology industries. By now, you've all heard about the global semiconductor shortage, or even more likely, you experience it firsthand. You know, you can probably get a new car, right? You can get your appliances. You're waiting months for the appliances or anything else, or you have to pay more for cell phones or laptops, and I can go on and on. But while the current shortage can partially be explained by the COVID-19 and international supply chains, really the root causes go back even further. In 1990, the United States' global share of semiconductor manufacturing capacity was 37%. Today, it's fallen to an alarming 12%. Come on. We can't let that keep happening. The effects of this decline and ensuing shortage cannot be overstated. Factories have closed, workers have been laid off, and prices have gone up. Now, almost two years ago, I joined a bipartisan group in the House and Senate to introduce the CHIPS for America Act. This bill established a roadmap for reasserting American leadership in strategically important semiconductor industry. Now, since then, two things have happened. The CHIPS Act was signed into law as part of last year's defense bill, and the need to fund it has only grown more severe as the global semiconductor shortage has dragged on. Thankfully, the American Competes Act includes a full $52 billion we need to comprehensively implement the CHIPS Act. This funding is about more than one specific technology or industry. It's about securing a fundamental building block of the 21st century technology economy. To tackle the semiconductor shortage, the CHIPS Act boosts American capacity in two crucial areas, manufacturing and research. Both are needed for long-term viability of a domestic supply chain. And to promote new manufacturing capacity, the bill provides almost $40 billion to help stand up new fabs. Those are the places that we could actually manufacture the semiconductors. And once a fab is up and running, they hold the potential to serve as an anchor institution for a community, attracting new workers, suppliers, transporters, apprenticeships, and importantly, lasting investments. So to promote new research capacity, the bill invests $5 billion to stand up new R&D initiatives. The research provisions in the CHIPS Act will create new opportunities for academia, government, and private sector researchers to collaborate in a dynamic atmosphere. And we heard all about it as we did our tour, the importance of collaboration. Institutions like the Berkeley National Lab, we know, is already a driving force, will continue to be even a more driving force in the bill's implementation. I will tell you the CHIPS Act funding is bipartisan, supported by the Biden administration, Congress, and will help workers and increase our research capacity. I look forward to working with Speaker Pelosi to pass it as soon as possible. And I know there's somebody else, and all of you I know who want it too, but I know someone else on the stage that I've been working with who is even more intense about this, I think. As CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger is guiding the company to a new era of innovation and product leadership. He's been a tireless advocate for this legislation and a close partner with me throughout our fight. So with that, I would like to bring on Pat, and as Speaker Pelosi says, our Mr. Chips, to the stage.
Thank you so much, Representative Matsui, and thank you for the kind words on the CHIPS Act. Dr. Witherall, thank you for showing off. This is great. And the invitation to speak on behalf of the semiconductor industry and Intel. Thank you, Representative Lee. Truly tremendous. And Madam Speaker, thank you so much. And this funding that's been discussed in the CHIPS Act and with the COMPETES Act will keep America in the center of innovation. In this great state of California, around the globe is known as the world-changing center of the planet. In 1984, I was going to school on the that other school on the other side of the bay. Apologies, I didn't quite get the red-blue thing at the time, but I was also working at Intel at the time on the 386 and 486, and I ended up working with Berkeley to do the first ever synthesis project that was put into commercial microprocessor. So even though I was going to school on that side, I had to come to Berkeley to have the most advanced chips research at the time. So thank you very much. And it was a pleasure taking the lab tour today. Thank you so much. And this work that occurred here at ALS was central to EUV, right? Extreme ultraviolet or X-ray lithography. Lithography is the center of semiconductor manufacturing. And this work has enabled us to move to 10 nanometers and just blast through it. And I'll say, seeing a clear pathway for lithographic improvement allows us to be guaranteed for a decade or more of Moore's Law into the future. And I always viewed Moore's Law as like driving on a foggy road. You see about 100 meters in front of you, and when you get 50 meters further along, you see about 100 meters in front of you. And it's always been about a decade that we can see into the future for Moore's Law. But I think what I saw today, we're good for a couple of decades. So thank you so much for the tour today. And it is an honor to speak on behalf of Intel Corporation as the CEO of this iconic company, the company that I like to say puts silicon into Silicon Valley. And with that, we are deeply committed to California and to American leadership in semiconductor technologies. With our 3 campuses in California, we're about 15,000 employees in California. I make my home here. My wife has made it very clear with her 8 grandchildren in California, we ain't going nowhere. And California's clearly are the design, the development, the innovation center of the world today. But as we've seen, everything is going digital. Everything digital runs on semiconductors. Literally every aspect of human existence relies on what we do. And as I would say, geopolitics were defined for the last 5 decades by where the oil reserves are. Where the fabs are for the next several decades is more important. Let's build them where we want them. And that's exactly what's at the heart of the COMPETES legislation, is to build them where we want them on American soil. And Intel is committed to restoring the end-to-end leadership on innovation and manufacturing here in the U.S. Since taking the job as CEO, and one of my board members is here, so one of my bosses is the Dean of Engineering, Sujay King, Sujay. So say nice things about me to her, that's appreciated. But since taking the job as CEO, I've announced $43.5 billion of U.S. investment. An extraordinary amount that we're putting onto U.S. soil, creating 7,000 manufacturing jobs, 20,000 indirect jobs, 11,000 construction jobs. We're investing heavily on U.S. soil to assure our supply chains for the long term. But while we're putting our chips on the table, as I like to say, we can't do it alone. And as we work to address the global chip shortage, we need support. Since the CHIPS Act began working its way through Senate and the House, we've seen legislation pass in Korea, in Taiwan, in Japan, in India, and now was passed out of commission in Europe as well, because they see the same issue. They want the fabs built on their soil. And that's why this legislation is so critical today, to have a globally balanced, resilient supply chain for the future. We welcome the opportunity to continue to work closely, and the California delegation represented here, led by Speaker Pelosi, thank you so much for your leadership on this critical matter. In fact, I would argue there is no more critical matter, maybe next to our situation in Europe, facing our nation today. And I would just ask the urgency. It takes a long time to build a fab. Let's get this done very quickly. Thank you so much. And with that, it's my honor to introduce the president of the UC Berkeley system, Dr. Michael Drake.
Thank you very much, Pat. Good to be here. I noticed it renamed the UC Berkeley system, but that didn't strike anyone here as weird. It sounded right, I think, to tell all of my bears here. And great to be here with my alumni. It's great to be here. And very nice to see Congresswoman Lee and Congresswoman Matsui, and always nice to see you, Speaker Pelosi. The University of California is really deeply grateful for all that you do in Washington and around the world to support public higher education and California's thriving research enterprise. Let me extend my congratulations to the Speaker for shepherding yet another piece of major legislation through the House. The America Competes Act makes significant new investments in the Department of Energy Office of Science, which supports the great work being done at our national labs, including here at Berkeley Lab and the National Science Foundation. This funding will help us continue to lead the world in developing scientific solutions to the most pressing issues of our time, chief among them being climate change. The America Competes Act will also help us tackle barriers faced by women, people of color, and all other groups who are underrepresented in STEM studies and research sectors. And I also want to take a moment to make sure to thank everyone here at Berkeley Lab and all the others who are not here at Berkeley Lab for the world-changing work you undertake every day. A special thanks to Director Witherall for his incredible stewardship of this important research engine for California and the nation. And when I thank Berkeley Lab, I want to thank the campus here at Berkeley and the University of California. I'm thinking as I was meeting Tristan and Michelle and Alejandro, particularly Alejandro, that when I was your age, living in Northern California, living in Congresswoman Matsui's district, I'd be driving to the Bay Area to where I then ended up living in Speaker Pelosi's district. But I'd look up on this hill and see the special buildings that were here, this special building in back of us, and think of the incredible work and the incredible science that were going on there. And think about that as an inspiring dream. There was no pathway in looking 100 yards forward there's no pathway I could see as a teenager to being associated with such a place. But what I did was I used the benefit of education here in Northern California, beginning at Stanford, as you know, but then improving, and there's always progress in the world. And I moved on then to the University of California, and then that created a pathway forward for me to be involved in science and technology and then higher education. And so the things that you all do here every day to make those dreams possible for people who you don't know and don't know you, but who are just driving by, realizing and imagining what you're doing and what's happening here and what the possibilities are. Thank you for that great work. Speaker Pelosi, all of us here at the University of California are so pleased that we have, I want to say just something to Chair Lee as well. I grew up in Congresswoman Matsui and Speaker Pelosi's district. My wife grew up in your district, so this is our whole family is represented here on the stage. These are our members. And we love looking at who our members are today compared to who they were when we were growing up. I'll just mention that briefly. It's really great to see the opportunities that have opened, and there's more to come. Let me finish by saying that to you, Speaker Pelosi, that all of us here at the University of California are so pleased to have had the chance to host you here today at Berkeley Lab. Your leadership continues to be bold and inspiring. Your commitment to advancing education, research, and innovation in California and around the world is unparalleled. Thank you for spending your time with us here today. With that, I will turn the program back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I accept all compliments on behalf of the House Democrats who have the courage to support all of these. We had an overwhelming vote on this. We took the time to discuss it, some of it repetitive, but just to make the point. This is transformative. This is just a collaboration of such magnitude that it will make a tremendous difference as to the independence of our country, the self-sufficiency of our country, the recognition that science not only plays but leads the way in everything, as I said before, from health to jobs to security to saving the planet. So we thank Berkeley for what you do, and I want to acknowledge, because it's just, I'm so thrilled to meet Jennifer Doudna. Thank you so much for your leadership. But in recognizing you, recognizing so many people, and when you were speaking, Pat, about the 150, was it yards or miles or what? Years, whatever the 150 was, it's an horizon. And we always, you never reach it, but you always aspire to it. And that aspiration with the intellectual resources, the training, the opportunity that is provided is a great thing for our country. Now, if you have any really difficult questions, they're all going to answer them. I would have worn red. I didn't wear blue just to wear blue, but my red was not clean.
Oh, good.
So I wore that. And then even now that we've got our housekeeping in order, we're happy to take any questions from the press. I want, if you will, stay with the subject at hand, at least for the start. Any questions regarding the Competes Act and our purpose here today? Yes, ma'am. Sorry, is it? Yeah.
Speaker Pelosi, there's a lot of concern over the raw material supplies and what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and how that's going to impact. Where are we going there with these raw materials that are needed to produce these chips?
Well, what is very important about the Competes Act is that it enables us, as I said, I've used the word a couple of times, independent and self-sufficient. There are two issues you mentioned, chips and supply chain. The supply chain issue is a big one, as Doris Matsui said, partially due to COVID, but not entirely. More of it just a path that we had been on. And this relates to inflation in our country too, because the smaller the supply, the bigger the price, and that's something that we address in this legislation as well by addressing the supply chain. Well, just a matter of history, a while back, some companies in our country decided that it was cheaper to make some things offshore. So a lot of the raw materials then moved offshore, and in doing so, it made us dependent. This legislation brings much of that home. And it not only brings it home from countries of concern, shall we say, but it also has some near-shoring of friendly countries that can be not political in terms of supplying those raw materials. So you really have to read, this bill is very comprehensive and very precise in that regard, offering opportunities for grants, for loan guarantees and the rest, for companies to bring things home, but some of that in the loan category to near shore.
Bill, but with every bill like this, a big bill, there's going to be some differences. And there were several bills put together, so we put them all together, and we had a Senate version and a House version. So I don't want to get in the weeds of this, but I will say that we're almost there, in the real sense, almost there, because we know what we already agree on. But I will say that we're almost there, in the real sense, almost there, because we know what we already agree on, which is the majority of it, and there's some little tweaks. You always have to make tweaks. You want to get them done now. And then you have some other little differences that we really have to figure out how we proceed forward on. It's nothing there is going to be a deal stopper at all. We just have to move forward on getting this thing done, and we are now, there's an urgency about this, and we all know that too. And we hear about it every single day. So this is going to get done.
I'd like to praise our chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Eddie Bernice Johnson, chairwoman from Texas. She spent her life Life in Congress focusing on this commands respect of the scientific and academic community, and her approach is a little different from the Senate approach, and again, none of it irreconcilable, but it's called a negotiation. We call it a reconciliation because we know it will be reconciled. Any other questions on? Okay. Any questions on any other subject? No? No. Did you want to go back to yours?
Sure. A question for all three of you, especially you, Congresswoman Lee. But we could have a refugee crisis.
Yeah.
We could have tens of thousands, if not millions, of Ukrainians. We're seeing it happen in Poland. Is the United States ready to take in any of these possible refugees coming in from Ukraine?
Well, Barbara Lee's committee is in charge of the funding. I'm going to yield to her on that. Right now, we are just hoping to minimize the loss of life in Ukraine, both when in a classified briefing, because I can't go into the exact numbers, but in a classified briefing right before, like about a week and a half ago, the number of civilians that could be killed under this circumstance, as well as the number of military on both sides. For what reason? For what purpose? How do you explain to the mothers of Russia that their children are coming home in body bags to humor the whatever of the president of their country? So again, this right now the focus is on that resolving of the challenge that is there. When we were in Munich, Barbara and I, we heard from the president of Ukraine came and spoke to the group, and the mayor of the city of Kyiv came and spoke to us directly in our small group, and he basically right now is taking up arms to fight. This is an assault on democracy. It's an assault on the Ukraine. It's an assault on the democracy. It's an assault on the United States, because that is what the president of Russia wants to do, is to show that democracies don't work and cannot thrive. He cannot stand having a thriving democracy at his doorstep so that the people of Russia can see what a better life can be. So this is where our focus is. Now, in terms of refugees, in terms of humanitarian assistance, in terms of funding for lethal and non-lethal weapons for the Ukrainians to defend themselves, I'm going to yield to Barbara on that score. But I will say what this conversation with the president earlier this morning, we are not going in. Putin is not going to provoke the world into NATO and the rest of us into World War III. If that's his goal, he will not succeed. If his goal was to split NATO, he has failed. NATO has never been stronger. But as I said earlier, Barbara was the person in most demand. Madam Chair of the purse strings, I yield to her.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a couple of things with regard to the humanitarian assistance and refugee assistance. Currently, the administration made public, I believe it was yesterday, that we have sent USAID several, probably close to 20 individuals as part of a disaster rescue assistance team to make an assessment of what we need to know, what we need to do, how much funding we need to look at to make sure that this humanitarian crisis, that we're prepared for it, because we know what is taking place right now. And so we're working with the administration to make sure we have the funding, whatever that is, and we haven't come up with the numbers yet. But our team there, they're based right now in Poland, they're going to give us that, their assessment. Secondly, on refugee assistance, the administration talked about and said we're going to do everything we can do to make sure that we allow for refugees to come to our country. It's important. People are dying. They're fleeing. People are afraid. It's traumatizing. Their families are here, their relatives, and it's upon us to do everything we can do to make sure that they are supported as they flee such a slaughter that's taking place. So thank you again, but we are definitely looking at the funding. But and the loan guarantees are for sure, because there are economic reforms taking place right now in Ukraine, but the administration put forth a $1 billion request for loan guarantees to continue with the economic reform efforts. Of course, the economy needs right now, needs our assistance anyway, because prior to the invasion, now, and as whatever takes place, the Ukrainian people are going to still need the economic assistance through our different accounts to help them manage and survive, just through whatever we can do to help through the loan guarantees.
Barbara, I think it's really important for people to understand the brilliance with which President Biden is conducting this. This is a man who served decades as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He knows the arena. He knows the personalities. He knows what we have to do and what the sequencing of it is. So when people say, well, why don't we do this on the first day? Let's trust the judgment that he has in this regard. And this is really an assault on the world order. You hear, what's his name, Putin talking about everything in his arsenal, including nuclear and the rest. Well, this has to be stopped. It has to be stopped, and not having violence beget violence, but violence to be stopped. And Barbara Lee, I think you would agree that the president is exhausting every remedy,
and has led to on the diplomatic front, and has unified, quite frankly, all of our allies in the world, really, to put diplomacy and to develop non-violent approaches to try to get some resolve to this terrible crisis that's taking place. But I can just say this is one of the few times I've really seen diplomacy as being the first priority to try to mitigate against the invasion and what has taken place.
In the meantime, let us all pray for the people of Ukraine, because they're undergoing a very, very sad situation. I'll just close by saying, did I say close before already? But this time I think I mean it. Yesterday morning, I had the occasion to have a conversation with the Speaker of their parliament in Ukraine. And what was so sad about it was that he was talking about the children. And some children are being carted off to Russia in those regions that they have tried to take over. But the children going from a peaceful democratic country to one that is under assault as he assaults democracy, it's such a tragedy. So again, the unity of not only NATO, it's 30 countries in NATO, but other countries, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, other countries throughout the world, in solidarity for democracy, for sovereignty, for peacefully, diplomatically, with sanctions and other tools to stop the violence. So thank you all very much. And by the way, what we're doing here on what the chips and the technology and the rest, and Pat references, is very important to our global security, because from the standpoint of our military, we consider the strength of our country, our health and education of our people, the technological strength that we have. But this leads to how we have digital security measures, whether it's how we arm our troops. And again, if we're not on the forefront of doing this and we insist on old ways, we will not prevail. So again, science about keeping us safe as well as healthy, well employed, and in a safe planet. Thank you all for making all of that possible. Thank you.